This is 4.3 Epidermis Notes. The essential question is, what are the layers in order that make up the epidermis, and what roles do they play in the skin? Skin, which is also called the cutaneous membrane, is made up of two layers. The more superficial layer, or the outer layer, is the epidermis, and the more deep layer, or the inner layer, is the dermis. The epidermis, recall from last unit, is made up of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, and the dermis layer is mostly connective tissue. The third layer that is not really part of the skin is called the hypodermis, or subcutaneous layer, and it lies underneath the dermis. And their job is to basically anchor the skin to the underlying layer. And the tissue that make up the hypodermis is adipose tissue. In this diagram of the skin, notice the epidermis is the thinnest layer, and it is made up of, remember, stratified squamous epithelium. Then we have the thickest layer, which is the dermis layer, made up of connective tissue. And then the layer that is not part of the skin, but is found underneath the dermis layer, is the subcutaneous layer, or the hypodermis layer, which is made up of mostly adipose tissue. Within the epidermis layer, there are 5 different layers. The deepest layer, or the bottom layer, is the Stratum BASALE, or also pronounced Stratum germinativum. And it separates the dermis from the epidermis, and this is what attaches the epidermis to the basement membrane. So there are several reasons why Stratum BASALE is an important layer. One of them being that it contains stem cells. Stem cells are cells that have not been determined what type of cell it's going to be. So you can kind of think of it as pre-cells. And so this is where cells are dividing to make more cells. As the cells move toward the surface of the skin, they become older. So newer layers of cells are toward the Stratum BASALE, and as they move up in the other upper loughers, then they slowly become older, and eventually when they get to the completely to the surface of the skin, they start sloughing off. They also contain stem cells of keratinocytes, which their job is to produce keratin. Remember, keratin in the previous unit were a type of protein that makes the epidermal layers stronger, prevents water loss, and gives an extra protection to the skin. It is the most abundant type of cells found in the epidermis, and it is found throughout all 5 layers of the epidermis. They also contain melanocytes. Melanocytes are cells that produce melanin, and remember, melanin is the primary pigment that gives the skin darker skin color, the brownish yellowish skin color, also the dark color in the eyes, and the dark hair color, all is made by the pigment melanin. Keep in mind, no matter what race or nationality you are, you have the same amount of melanocytes. The difference is that depending on certain races, the amount of melanin that is produced by the melanocytes can vary. So the more melanin you produce, the darker your skin. The less melanin you produce, the lighter your skin. The next layer up is the Stratum spinosum, or spinosum. There are several layers of keratinocytes that have arisen from produced at the Stratum BASALE and have moved up. And this is where the melanin is actually taken in by the cells. Even though the melanin is produced at the Stratum BASALE, the cells start taking in the melanin at the Stratum spinosum. And it gets its name when you look at the cells under the microscope. It has a spiny, spiky kind of appearance. The next layer up is the Stratum GRANULOSUM. This is made up of 3 to 5 layers of keratinocytes, and this is where keratinization occurs, which means that the cells start to die and take in a lot more keratin. They become more packed and they become a tough material towards stratum granulosum. Next layer up is stratum lucidum. The word lucid means clear or transparent. It is made up of 2 to 3 layers of keratinocytes, and you do not find stratum lucidum in every area of the body. You will only find in areas where you have a thicker skin, such as the palms of the hands or soles of the feet. The most superficial or the most outer layer is the stratum corneum. It is made up of 20 to 30 layers of tightly packed, flat, dead cells of keratin. And remember, the keratin is, the function of it is for waterproofing, preventing water loss, protection against any kind of abrasions or scratches, and this is where the cells are shed. And you are basically shedding maybe 50,000 cells or more of cells every minute. For this whole process from stratum basale all the way up to the cells reaching the stratum corneum takes about 2 to 4 weeks. So think about when you get a tan, for you to lose that tan, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks because of this. That's how long the cells that were produced at the stratum basale level comes all the way to the stratum corneum, and then it's shed and it's lost. Here in the picture on the bottom, you notice the 5 layers of the epidermis. Starting from the deepest layer is the stratum basale in the red. Then the thickest layer out of the 5 layers of epidermis is the stratum spinosum or spinosum in orange. And we come to the layer in pink, which is the stratum granulosum. The next is the more translucent layer, which is the stratum lucidum in blue. And lastly, the most superficial layer in the more like a peach color is stratum corneum. Keep in mind that epidermis is avascular, which means that it does not have any blood supply, and still the stratum basale and stratum spinosum is still living cells, but from stratum granulosum to all the way up to corneum, this is dead cells. Here's another diagram of the layers of the epidermis, and on the right I have a little acronym or a little phrase that can help you remember the layers. Remember, you just need to know that we are starting from the most deep layer or the bottom layer, and it goes big is for stratum basale, smelly is stratum spinosum, and gorilla would be stratum granulosum, likes would be stratum lucidum, and then corn would be stratum corneum. So big smelly gorilla likes corn. A few other kinds of things that you notice in this diagram is that you see the melanocytes, which produces melanin, which give you the dark hair color, dark eye color, and dark skin color. Then you also see keratinocytes, which produces keratin, which creates keratin for the protein that gives an extra protection to the skin. But there are 2 other cells. One is called the Langerhans cells, which is found in the stratum spinosum, and their job has an immune function. So it's an extra protection for anything that tries to come in contact with the skin that can make you sick. It has a immunity factor. Also, it protects you against protects you against any kind of cancerous cells also. Another cell down here, which is called the Merkel cell. Merkel cell and tactile disc kind of go together. Merkel cells are also called tactile cells, which their job is to basically, that's the reason why you can sense the sense of touch against your skin. So when a fly lands on you and you notice even that little faint touch that you know something is on you, it's because of the Merkel cells. The 4.3 notes homework is: number 1, list the layers of the skin in order. Number 2, what role do melanocytes and keratinocytes play in protecting the skin? Number 3, what makes stratum basale unique?